If you were to tell me, boy, Trevor, that thing behind you is rusty and not much to look at, I'd say, well, don't judge a book by its cover. And as Heraclitus, the ancient Greek philosopher, said, the only constant in life is change. And we'll find out how this car behind me went from a beautiful Colonial dining car to the maintenance of way car you see now. Stay tuned. This is going to be a fun one. B&O has been known for a great many things over the course of its history. But in relation to this video, the biggest thing I would argue is the dining cars and the dining car service. As I'm sure some of you know, the B&O's Royal Blue was known for just chef's kiss, beautiful dining cars as well as dining car service on that route from DC to New York. But from the inception of the dining car up until the early 1920s, that fleet of dining cars at the B&O had become really run down and worse for wear. So, in the early 1920s, the B&O passenger car department, dining car department, and others put their heads together and said, hey, why don't we put an order out to the Pullman company to build us 20 new dining cars. And so the order went out in 1923, and they were to build 20 cars over the course of 7 years. So from 1923 to 1930, these cars were to be manufactured, sent out to the B&O Railroad, and then put out into the fleet. And the neat part about these cars is that they were to be kind of throwback cars. The B&O, much like myself, were history nerds, and they had said, well, in this case, why don't we name them after famous and great women of the American Revolutionary War / colonial period? And so of those 20 names that went out, were stenciled on the sides of these cars, names like Martha Washington, Betsy Ross, Dolly Madison, and in this case, Catherine Greene. And I find this to be absolutely fascinating. I think the B&O were purveyors of their history. They were very progressive in terms of making sure that they also preserved their own legacy. And that is no more true than in this car. And so from, again, this car, the Catherine Greene, its inception in 1930, until eventually it was turned into something different. We'll get into that later. This car really served its passengers well, and it really gave them a colonial feel. Things like leaded glass windows on either side of the main windows. Beautiful, beautiful casework and woodwork that was to be stained to look like mahogany. And old, very colonial styled seating in the dining car itself. And these cars would seat 36 passengers. Eventually that would be changed to 48. But originally they were set up for 36 passengers. And it is absolutely just mind-blowing how beautiful, beautiful these cars were straight out of the Pullman company. So as we started out this episode, quoting our friend Heraclitus, saying, the only constant in life is change. And change we will. This car behind me went from the Catherine Greene to a number, 1067. The year 1942 rolls around, and the B&O had said, all right, it's time to make a change in these cars. We're into the 40s now, and we're going to do some upgrading to these things eventually. So 1942 rolls around. This and the other 19 Colonial Diners then go from names, Dolly Madison, Martha Washington, etc., on to numbers. So now we're into the era of this thing being known as 1067. And we have to keep in mind that this is World War II era for America. That's 41 to 45. And so it's hard to find things like lead, various metal products, rubber, etc. And so when this thing enters the shops, the B&O it was starting to get worse. I should say it like this. It was starting to get harder and harder for the B&O Railroad to find replacement parts for this thing as things wore out. Things like the leaded glass and the beautiful pewter light fixtures that were in between the windows, that would shine onto the table and illuminate the rest of the car. It was really getting hard during wartime to find some of these things. So this was also the time for change for these dining cars. And so they went into the shops in 1944, and they would become F 4 BMs. That was their classification. And so they would get things like streamlining along the sides of the trucks. There's a pretty neat photo I'll flash up on the screen of these things so you can see the streamlining coming down the sides of the trucks. The clerestory roofs had been covered over by streamlining as well. And those leaded glass windows and the main windows were removed in favor of just these round cornered windows that you can see on a lot of modern day passenger cars. And so this transformation is pretty significant because this is the last time this car will ever be used in dining car service. So it's post 1944, and the 1067 behind me here is now plying the rails as a modern dining car on routes such as the National Limited, the Capital Limited, and the Royal Blue. But as we know, things don't always stay the same, especially in railroading. And so in August of 1959, this car would go into the shops and come out as X-4058. X standing for non-revenue car. It doesn't make money for the railroad. And it becomes the camp car or maintenance of way / MOW car that it is today. And there's a really good photo, and I'll flash this up on the screen for you, of this car. And it was just a basic blue, we'll say a B&O blue color along the sides. The end where I'm sitting now would have been a decent, a fairly moderate yellow color and with a gray roof. And so, it went from this prestigious Colonial Diner to a modern diner. And now it served its owners, the B&O, as a camp car. So why don't we head inside and have a look-see. Alright, so now we're inside. A couple things I want to point out is, as we go along, we're going to look at things in the context of this entire car's lifespan, because this is a literal timeline of stuff that was left over from previous iterations of it and as it moved into the future. So let's keep that in mind as we go along and try to point out some little details. Now, as you saw from the beginnings of this video, this car has seen better days. So you have to bear that in mind as we go through this. Alright, so first thing you notice is as you come into the door, there's a fusee holder here. That would be, again, for fusees, and this lock has definitely seen some better days. And as we come across here, we see this would be for what seems like a whistle of sorts, because this also goes directly outside into a pipe that is capped. So I do believe that is for a whistle. And moving down, follow this pipe down here, we got ourselves a brake valve. So you could control the brakes, the air brakes on this train if you were, say, in a shoving move and you were heading whichever direction is away from the locomotive. But if you were heading in that direction, you were protecting the shove, you would use this in order to apply brakes and whatnot. Oh, and obviously you can, there's vent to atmosphere here. So if you dump the air, it goes right there. And a little speedometer here. I think this is pretty fascinating. Made for, was it Electric Tachometer Corporation, Philadelphia. That's pretty neat. And it's a pretty basic setup too, minus the bird's nest. Just 2 wires going into this, and then this would snake down and go to the trucks, and there would be a speedometer on the trucks. So let's come back and look at this side here. This fancy millwork. Now remember, I did talk about this, is the colonial cars, or the colonial dining cars as they were called, were very, very fanciful on their woodwork. So you can still see, oh, it's fascinating, I'm looking at it now, and I will show you. There are still some beautiful remnants of that stuff in here. So all is not lost and it's not forgotten. But let's go back here. So we see this beautiful millwork as it comes up, and it comes over, it comes down into here. And again, this is spread all throughout the car. These were the original. I've looked at multiple photographs of the car through its iteration, And so these are definitely the original, I don't know what you want to call them, a soffit of some sort, but the blinds are the original blinds. Hopefully you can see that pattern. That's a pretty epic pattern. So this most likely would have been from when it was the F4 BM iteration of it. So after the Colonial days, and again, this is standard on most, if not all, railroad cars, is just the pull down. Oop, it does move. And these little patterns like this all throughout. This is, we'll flash a few photos up of the interior, but you'll be able to see all this. This is original. This is just as it came out of the Colonial car, the Colonial Dining car, I should say. So this is the original millwork. And I don't know, that seems like aluminum to me. I believe that is. There's some, I'm sure there is some wood in here somewhere, but that's the casework there. And I believe this would have been a duct for the air conditioning that came in through the clerestory roof. It was pumped in through there and eventually covered over. So this is, again, you could see the the lifespan of this thing. Don't know what the original color would have been. It's hard to, I don't know, because the photographs are black and white. But the casework here obviously has been, whatever the original color was, I almost guarantee you it's not green, but it was green at some point in its life, and it has gone to this tan, and then this would have been how it looked in the maintenance of way service. So we have moved all the way here in this car, which would be at the museum. This is facing west, and this is facing east. And all that lovely stuff that's thrown in here, that's actually the remnants of a previous MOW car that was here at the museum. I cannot remember how many. This is long before I was here, which was 8 years ago. So definitely this may even go back into the early 2000s. I don't know right off the top of my head, but there is definitely an entire car within a car here. Like, that's pretty neat to me. So why don't we go on the other side and have a look-see. So I've moved to the east end of the car, which is also the B end. And if you know railroad parlance, B is for brake end. And here it is. There. And there's a chain that runs down. And then as you rotate the wheel and such, that pulls the chain and then pulls the brake shoes against the wheels. So here's something that I think is pretty neat. It's hard to say if this is the original floor, but I do know that the Colonial Diners did have brick style tiling in here. So could this be the original tile? It's hard to say, but I'm gonna fathom to guess that yes, because this was the kitchen area. And if we look at the original blueprints, we see that this curved wall goes like this, all the way up to the, we'll call it line of disembarkation down there. And we'll go back to the other side to show you that. This entire area here would have been the kitchen. And here is the icing on the cake. They say in history, you're supposed to look for primary sources. Here's a primary source. Yahtzee, we win. There it is. The original certificate, if you want to call it that, from the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, saying that yes, this is an F4 BN car. And It is number 1067. And that has been here this entire life. I don't know about you, but as a history nerd, it's pretty amazing to find stuff like that. So above us would have been the water tanks here. I want to say these were for feeding the sinks and the kitchen area and whatnot. So these massive, massive water tanks. And again, keep in mind, this has been changed throughout its life from the dining car. When it was a dining car, these big windows, these small windows here would have been very, very large style windows. I want to say probably 24 by 24 or 24 by 36. Not 100% sure on the dimensions, but they would have been 2 foot by 3 foot or 2 foot by 2 foot, fairly large. We could probably actually just measure those. You can see the aluminum cutouts in them. There, the original, figure out what size the windows are, but I'm not going to go that into depth on this. But so they changed those around so that way they were smaller, they were easier to deal with. There's little things, and then there's vents on the other side, and we'll go over there and take a look. But so again, yeah, there's the curved wall, it comes back out. And so this was the cook's area. When this thing was the Colonial Diner, this would have been where all the fun kitchen equipment was. Galley style kitchen, right? So for those of you who have been on a ship, very tight quarters there. Not much to really do and move around in. Let's see if we can get a good look over here. Not too much to see over on this end. And then here's the brake wheel from the inside of this. So again, external and an internal brake wheel. So let's go back to the west end of the car. Let's go back to the west end of the car, and I'll show you the transition in the flooring, because that's kind of neat too. All right, so I've moved back to the east end of the car here, so I want you to have a look at the floor. And so this was just a pure poured concrete floor, which was very stereotypical of the 1920s. Especially Pullman cars. I mean, American Car and Foundry and the other ones kind of did the same thing, but here's the transition I want to point out here. Clearly this has been redone. This is vinyl tile over, it seems like another vinyl flooring. Hard to say. Definitely was installed when it was a MOW car. That I can tell you. That much I can tell you. But definitely, probably say 70s or 80s era vinyl tile. And this is what I called the line of disembarkation here. So you can see clearly where they just took out this paneling right here, just an abrupt stop. No moss, no more. And this was turned into, this is the abrupt area. And there would have been, if they, back in the Colonial and the F4BM dining car days, this would have been the transition point between the dining section and the kitchen section here. So there would have been a wall here. Obviously this is plywood, because it's a camp car, you know. When you're working on track, you don't really care, you know, that the kitchen is stainless steel and all that good stuff. You don't care. You just want a kitchen that works. So this is the transitioning point here. And what I think is pretty neat, here's another shot of those windows. Hopefully you can kind of see there. That looks more like, that might even be 4 feet, but 2 foot by, it's definitely 2 feet tall. By probably 3 or 4 feet wide would have been the original windows, is my guess. So, and again, above us is the HVAC system of sorts there. That would have gotten pumped all through the car, through the vents and through the clerestory roof. So this is kind of cool. You can see where the original clerestory roof ended, and then they added on this section to make it into the streamlined section here. So this would have been the streamlined section. This was when it was still just a clerestory roof. so I've moved outside of the car now. I'm back on the east end of the car, but on the north side. So I want to show this to you. You may find this interesting. So this truck, this three-axle truck, is not the original. This came actually from the Hooper car that was the Edward G. Hooper, the 3302 that's in the front yard of the museum, and I'll show you that one real quick. So that came from that car and was put onto here when it was moved from Union Bridge, Maryland, out to here. I always find it fascinating that they still had wood blocks as insulators, if you will, in these trucks. And we're moving a little bit west here. There's some of the brake rigging. And here's the battery box. Two of them. Vent holes. Here's the brake cylinder itself. Oh, that's cool. Looks like 86. March 26, 1986 from the B&O. Huh. Last time it was probably overhauled and put back on the car. Here's the reservoir, the air reservoir for the brakes. I can't really see a date on that. 8976 perhaps? Hard to say. Don't really know. Now here is the original truck. So most likely this would have been the original truck from when it was a Colonial Diner and then moved into the F4BM. Now, those trucks came from the factory with plain bearings inside of journal boxes. But I don't know. I'm gonna estimate and say that these roller bearings were put in probably somewhere in the 80s. It's a guess at this point because it's hard to say when it was converted over. I'm gonna say 70s, 80s, somewhere in that time period. Again, not 100%, but let's keep going here. And then here is the rear platform, which I think is kind of cool. Let's go up inside and have a look. All right, so I'm on the rear platform here, and again, as this thing was to be the Catherine Greene and the 1067, this, when I'm standing in front of, under, around, whatever, would not have been here. This would have been a full dining car all the way to the very end, right to here. But when this was turned into an MOW car, again in August of 1959, this, we'll call it an observation deck, for lack of a better term, because that's kind of what it is, was put on here, which I think is kind of neat, because, whew, this is stout. So I believe there was another piece that was here at some point. You can tell by the weld marks here. See by the welds, there's clearly another piece here. But then, obviously that is gone. But yeah, so this would have been where the track crew would have entered and exited the car. It's the easiest way to get up. Is through here, and then here's the doorway to get in. Also, I want to point this out. Here is the one of two electrical connections, external electrical connections. So this would have been for if they parked the car in any place that they could plug in electricity. You know, if they're out on a track gang or a rec gang somewhere, that they could plug in and they could have heat, electric lights, and hopefully air conditioning if it's, you know, the dead of June or July. So one last thing I want to point out here while I'm on the observation platform is, we'll call it the thriftiness of railroads. So as you saw in the previous photo, when this thing was X4058, it was painted in this, the rest of the car was blue. Maybe the whole thing was painted blue. It's kind of hard to surmise at this point, but I do know that the A end of this car was eventually painted yellow and then into the CSX. But it's kind of neat because if you look real here, here's the blue. Another layer on top, that's the yellow. And there's that color, which I I'm assuming was painted when it went into CSX time frame. So I want to point that out. I thought that was kind of cool. You can literally see the passage of time right here. And again, the thriftiness of railroads. So unfortunately, you can no longer do dinner in the diner in the inside of this car. But I sure hope you got a fun and historical look at this car and had as much fun exploring it as I did. And if this kind of stuff interests you, stay tuned to the channel. We got some really good stuff coming up that I am excited for, and hopefully you are too. So this is Trevor from History on the Move, and get out there and see some railroads, read some books about this stuff. This stuff's pretty fascinating. So take care until I see you the next time.